Hey folks, and welcome to the Counter Clipping Show for October 18th, 2021. We have a big show today, and I mean big because we're going to talk once again about one of my favorite topics inside wargaming, which is monster games. We're going to talk about we did a previous stream on monster gaming, and you can go back and watch that if you want. We had some good discussion there, but we're going to focus less this time on what makes a game a monster game or not, and more on what are the biggest of the big monster games. And it is very likely that the very well-informed folks here in the chat will have something to teach me about some of those big games. Definitely, I haven't played that many of them, but I got some pictures of the ones that I have played and have pictures of, not counting the ones on Vassal. So we'll be going through that later in the show. So for now, let's get started. As you can see, we are drinking Stranahan's Colorado whiskey. It is a single malt. I think it's a single malt whiskey, actually. Yes, single malt whiskey, which just means that it was all made at Stranahan's in this context. And it's pretty good. We're trying to make space on the shelf, so we are getting rid of it, and we are clipping Chandragupta, which is one of the relatively few great Battles of History games that I don't have clipped yet. I think this Hoplite and the two Japanese games are the ones that aren't clipped. So we're going to get done with this. For those who don't know, GMT's weekend at the warehouse just wrapped up. This is the first one in a while, I think, since the pandemic. Just Stegard, who is in the chat, thanks for stopping by, has some video on that. I watched that earlier today. That is worth your time if you want to see what kind of things go on at weekend at the warehouse, including at least one bona fide monster game. The Battle for Normandy, which presumably they would be playing under the new rules, I would assume. So then Gene's Mr. President game looks slightly, I don't know, but it's big, right? It's like 2 maps, so that might qualify as a monster Euro, whatever that even means. So let's say hello to Missing Seattle, Robert Moffat, Peter Bergs, Antoil, John Sy, all the way from the sunny Philippines, Alan Salazar, E4 Airman, Rob Johnson, John Clark Stigler is in the house, Half-Assed Gaming, Rick Cox, who Half-Assed Gaming and I will both be at the Compass Expo next month. It's the same weekend as Historicon, and it's the same weekend as the San Diego Historical Games thing online. So it'll be a busy weekend. Without any awareness of the complexities of the schedule that weekend, signed up to go to Compass Expo. So also hello to Rick Cox, Henry Sikorsky, Joel, Mike Anthony, Wade Moore, Jeff Anderson, John Stanley, The Command Tent, Dale Brady, Mike Orwick, Richard Kerr, Crusty Captain Joe Faust from sunny Akron, Ohio. Weather here was beautiful today. Jeff Beeler, Mike Orwick, who I think I said hello to already, Board Game Bloke, Fucko, Findle70, Ken Cloby, Brian Gash, and Mander. So hello to everybody in the house. So we don't go over the same territory. Let me stipulate that the first monster game is Dragnok Austin from GDW in 1973. I think that does predate War in the East First Edition, I think. I'm willing to be corrected on that, but I did not look it up to verify that. It does definitely predate La Bataille de la Moskva. That I did check. So, and it's funny that we should mention, of course, this is what made me think of, hey, let's talk about monster games again, because this showed up. So, I have no scheduled plans to punch it and clip it, but that might happen. I got to figure out how I'm going to organize those games should I decide to punch and clip them rather than playing with our local Europa guys copy, which is what we're doing right now. So yes, nice shirt, very good. And this is one of my favorite Penzi shirts. We of course bought shirts every time we went. So and Rob Johnson makes a good point that we'll mention now. Monster gaming is more practical now than it has ever been because, not really of Tabletop Simulator, but because of Vassal. Tabletop Simulator is less good at the kinds of games that monster games tend to be. I won't say it can't be done, and I won't say it's not a valuable tool, but I think you're going to see more mileage out of Vassal. So Mike Anthony says the first monster game is Theseus versus the Minotaur, and he could be right about that. Well, what about Marduk versus Tiamat? Huh? So there you go. Hey, at least you're buffering and not me. I've had shit internet for like the past week or so, and it should be okay now. So, one of the things that was always on my radar as somebody that was going to Origin since the mid-90s was Europa, because Europa Fest was at Origins every year, and we would see people playing big Europa games, right? By the way, if there's any interest from people in the chat of playing a big Europa game at Origins 2022, let me know, please. We are trying to get people interested in enough to get a game or two going, and we have some ideas, and we have some people signed up already. So, these games are more practical now than they have been in the past because of these electronic tools. You no longer have to necessarily have, even if you're playing them, like face-to-face via a chat software, like a voice software, you don't have to have a physical space for it to be set up anymore. Now, of course, I got some experience playing monster games, a lot of which was in the last couple of years, or last 10 years or so, maybe anyway. But some was back in the day, right? I mean, we played War in Europe back in the day. We played World in Flames back in the day, but I think World in Flames is just a regular monster and not a mega monster. Today we're talking about the mega monsters. And I don't know that everything that I have a picture of necessarily qualifies as a mega monster, but, we're doing what we can here too. So I'm going to pull up some slides. And at least a couple people in the chat might recognize a couple of these, by the way. So this is our game from a few years ago of 3 days of Gettysburg. And I think this is the smallest thing, maybe. Now, it's about the same size as War Between the States, which you'll see a picture of later. But this is like the only shot I got of the entire map, as opposed to just close-ups of the, 1st Infantry and stuff like that. This is from a Winterfest, a couple of Winterfests ago. This is the big panoramic shot of Atlantic Wall. This is not the biggest thing I personally have played, but I would absolutely... we used the rules out of Twin Peaks, because Twin Peaks had the up-to-date rules at the time. So, and trust me, there's nothing in Twin Peaks this big. Plus, you'll recognize Gettysburg from the map. So, Ronald Nicholson, thanks for stopping by. There's also two ways, and we've talked about this before in the past. There's also two definitions of footprint that a monster game can have. One is that it takes a lot of physical space, and the other is that it takes a lot of time. And Campaign for North Africa is not any bigger than DAC. It's pretty much the exact same size as DAC, which is a big game, right? It's a 5-map game. But, by reputation at least, it takes an estimated 1,500 hours to play. Which, I think by any reasonable standard is a mega monster at that point. World in Flames, on the other hand, does not take 1,500 hours to play. You might take 200, 150, something like that. So, density is another thing, but you can have a small game. OCS Smolensk is a good example of a small game. It's one map with, I think it's got 2 or 3 counter sheets, something like that. I think it's 3, with relatively high density. And while that's not a one-sitting game, that's not a game that's going to take 50 hours to play either. That's about a 20 or 30-hour game. And I don't think that qualifies as a mega monster, maybe a mini monster, even though it is one map. So there's some folks playing. Clay Stone is one of them, Campaign for North Africa, and journaling their progress on Facebook. And we've talked about this before, that I think using modern tools, leveraging things like Excel and stuff, you could probably play Campaign for North Africa more efficiently than you would have dreamed possible back in 1981. So, Sofa Kings, thanks for stopping by. So next up here we have another, I would say, mini monster. This is Balance of Powers from Compass Games and designer John Gorkowski. I don't know who Mike Gorkowski might be. John Gorkowski, John Gorkowski design. A good, well-rounded game on the First World War. A lot of people didn't like the map art style. I actually like the map art style, and the counters for that matter. But in places the art was making it harder to read than it should have. Jim's right. La Bataille de la Moskovo was 75. Dragonok Austin was 73. I'd like to know when War in the East first edition was. Second edition was definitely after Dragonok Austin. There are people. Stigler mentions that he wouldn't call Empire of the Sun a monster, and I certainly would not. I don't think that's credible, but I have seen it described that way. Was that the actual last name for Monsters, Inc.? Actually, it's been a long time since I've seen that. So, Le Grand Armée. Actually, if you play the TSR Le Grand Armée, which is a pretty different game from the SPI Le Grand Armée, and quite a bit bigger and more ambitious, I think it's a legit monster, actually. I just got it a couple of months ago. I haven't really looked at it yet. I'm given to understand that it has some problems. But I got it pretty good. I got it for a pretty good price. So, Stigler, I agree. Empire of the Sun is complex. It's not that complex, but it is very dense. The amount of moving parts in Empire of the Sun is really, really high. Fast Carriers, mentioned by Doug Sunseth. I haven't really looked at that. I'm familiar with the game only by name. Of course, I don't have pictures of any like the stuff we played back in the 90s for obvious reasons. But here is Case Blue, of course. This was mentioned, the first thing that was mentioned, I think, in the chat here. You can see that our two 4 by 8 foot tables are not large enough to contain the immensity that is Case Blue. Now, I think that Death Ride Curse is a bigger footprint than this. I'm pretty sure it is, actually. But this is the biggest thing I've played, and I'm not sure I'm ever going to even try to do Death Ride Curse. So, and Death Ride Normandy is going to be enormous, too, once that happens. Achilles, thanks for stopping by again. War Between the States picture is coming. We did not play Case Blue to the scenario completion. We played it till concession, which was quite a bit less time. It does move, provided you have 4 to 6 players. You really want 4 to 6 players on this thing, maybe 8. Particular pictures of that is coming up as well. I try to limit this to one picture of each thing. Speaking of that, this is Were Eagle's Dare and the Devil's Cauldron. It is broken into 2 map sections because the 2 games maps meet at an angle, and it's an awkward angle unless you have absolutely unlimited table space to set your tables up weirdly, and we didn't, so we just set it up all the way down one table. Closer to us here is the Devil's Cauldron. Farther away is Were Eagle's Dare. I played on the Devil's Cauldron side. We had a fabulous time. This was the last Winterfest I went to, which would have been 2020? Is that right? Or 2019? Something like that. Nathan Lander mentions Imperium Romanum. That's a good call out. I wouldn't think so. Monster, some of those scenarios. So bear in mind, there's no campaign game in Imperium Romanum, despite legendary sources that say that there was intended to be a campaign game. Al Nafi says that that's not the case, and I'm going to take Al's word for it. And I mean, if you know how that game works, it becomes not really believable that there could be a campaign game, right? So, where are we going with this stuff? Let's see here. I'm not being as fastidious with organizing this thing as I would otherwise have been. Now, there are, of course, also opportunities at big... some people are lucky enough to know, to have friends with big basements and no cats that you can leave monster games set up for a couple of years. I am fortunate to be in that situation. A lot of other folks have to wait until they go to a big convention, and not just a big convention. Well, not necessarily a big convention, because even like Console World Expo isn't that big a convention. It draws a few hundred people, but it's a long convention. It's 8, 9, whatever it is, days. So you can play for 7, 8, whatever it is, days, and really get a lot done, to the point where we've done the Regal's Dare, or I have been aware of at any point in paying attention to the Regal's Dare and Devil's Cauldron combo in 5 and 7 day conventions, and I've always seen it come to a conclusion, right? Maybe not the end of the scenario, but we had a conclusion. We were sure that there was an Axis win in this last game, for example. The other game, they did come to a conclusion too, but they messed the game up. So third winner is big. We have a third winner picture in here too somewhere. Let's mention, friend of the channel, ID Jester, is having his live stream, The War Room, which happens on every Saturday, pretty much. And on October 23rd, it will be his second anniversary of streaming. I have given no thought to what I will do on my anniversaries of streaming, which is actually coming up. So there will be giveaways, and their wives are coming on the show, so do not forget to stop by to give them some good-natured grief. Here is Winter Offensive 2020, 29, whenever that was. This is Long Roads to Gettysburg. This is the current, I think, biggest campaign thing you can play in the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War series. And they finished it in I think they finished it I didn't play in this. I played in Long Roads to Antietam, which they absolutely did finish. Now, bear in mind, there's kind of an expediter running this with them to kind of keep people moving and handle the supply and stuff like that. So some of the campaign rules are rules that the players don't need to manage, but this moved surprisingly swiftly. Cataclysm, now, yeah, I mean, the space is a big deal, right? So I have, and at some point I'll show this off. I got a picture frame, I got a build-it-yourself picture frame that I made that sits over top, and I backed it with like a thin board that sits over top of a one map game, so that I could put it on top and the cats won't bother, because I got 4 cats, if you don't know. So, and a dog, but the dog don't come up here. So yeah, I mean, space is a big problem. It would be a big problem. You can get by doing stuff like setting dice aside, or scattering dice around the map as spacers, so just putting more plexi on top if you have a surplus of plexi, which I do. Some of these games that take legendarily long to play, like Fire in the East, I now believe that is playable in quite a bit shorter amount of time than I would have thought possible prior to having played the system. So I'm not going to give you a hard time frame, but cavalry. But we might be able to demonstrate that at Origins next year, so we will see. Henry mentions Vassal once again. Yeah, I agree. It really does add a lot of it. Well, it removes a lot of the impracticality that you would otherwise suffer playing games this big, right? Not least of which, I mean, don't forget all the setup time you're saving too, assuming the Vassal module is good and has the setups in it. Sometimes they aren't good and or don't have the setups in them, which means you got to take quite a bit of time to set them up. But still, you don't have to take it down. You can just not ever open the file again. Absolutely. One True Phlegm, Under an Iron Sky, Deadly Northern Lights, and the upcoming Sacred Oil are absolutely in the... And if you put them all together, you're definitely talking Mega Monster. The biggest Mega Monster that I think we're likely to see is probably... And this is debatable because I'm convinced that nobody's played it ever, is the Decision War in the Pacific. Played beginning to end, right? They may have done what we did and played to a conclusion, without necessarily playing till the very end of, mid-August 1945. It's got 7 maps. This is the decision version, right? The SPI version, which I have and which I would love to play, but there are playable scenarios in both versions, right? Or at least less unplayable scenarios. Let me put it that way. The SPI version has its 7 maps and a decent number of off-map displays, so it's got a really big footprint. But in addition to that, the decision version has, I think, even more off-map displays, plus island maps for every single island. Now, you don't necessarily need to have all those island maps set up at any given time. You really only need them if they're being fought over. But you kind of need them if they're being garrisoned, too. Maybe that's part of the rules. I don't know. I've on the record as saying I don't think that thing's worth anybody's time. But part of the calculus on that is that if it is worth your time, it's going to be worth a whole lot of your time, right? And that's, I could well believe that falls into the ludicrous 1,500-hour territory. Those are just the fatigue markers on the dish in the middle. I do not have a shot of our second front game that's like a panoramic shot. Russia Besieged is fundamentally a one-map game. I know that it's got more than one physical map, but it's Russian campaign, which was a one-map game, right? So I don't think, even though it's actually hard to play Russian campaign in a single sitting. It's a bit long, but I don't consider it a monster for that reason. There are other people who might disagree, and especially for like an upscaled version like Russia Besieged, I could see why people might think that. I picked this shot of all the shots I had from Second Front because it shows the insane density, and because it is not a garbage picture. Like, I think I must have changed phones partway through our Second Front game, actually, because my early Second Front pictures are crap. So, yeah, I mean, this is not the densest shot I have of this Second Front game either. So, I guess, by the way, I'm officially buying Europa games at this point, since I've bought 3 of them in the last couple of weeks. I've got a copy of the Urals coming, and I've got a copy of the Africa Oriental game, which is this is with the core markers. I mean, I know, yes, the core markers help, but in this big game, we just didn't have enough core markers. There were not enough core markers in the game to accommodate all of our stacks. So, yes, I agree, it helped, but it would have helped if we'd had more. One True Fleb, if you want to send a picture, you can send it to ardwulfslair@gmail.com. This is now these are all games I personally was playing in, right? I have some other pictures of big things like some big Labatt games and other big OCS games and stuff like that. The big Chickamauga game, for example, that I did not participate in, so I didn't include those pictures. But this is the Third Winter. This is from our game from Buckeye Game Fest, the War Room, a couple of years ago. By the way, Buckeye Game Fest was canceled for 2021, but has been rescheduled for, I believe, April of 2022. There will be a War Room. I will be talking about that more as the event gets closer. And of course, Third Winter is a pretty big game, right? I had a lot of fun with this game. I was playing the Germans. I had a lot of fun with this game. This is War Between the States. Now, we played the decision version, but the differences between the two are very small, even to the point where some of the original errors that were in the original game were retained in the decision games version. Nevertheless, the map is a lot nicer, that's for sure. And it's a decent game. It's got some really interesting things going on. This is an Irad B. Hardy design, who I think is one of the unsung designers out of SPI that nobody really talks about. He had his hands in a lot of interesting things, and this is one of them. I think at the end of the day, I think this ends up not working that well, but nevertheless, like I said, we did have fun with it, and it does have some really interesting things as far as managing waves of conscriptions and things like that. Daniel Berger, one map monster. I mean, you can have a one map monster, I think. I don't think Empire of the Sun is one of them. I'm having trouble thinking of an example. Like, say, how big a... I mean, how high a density or how big a footprint does it have to have if it's only one map? Or how long does it have to take to play if it's only one map to be a monster? I guess that's the question. Joe Faust mentioned Steel Wolves. That's an interesting choice. I'd be curious to know how long the campaign takes to play. Because I think that covers like the entire Atlantic War from beginning to end. War Between the States does have production spirals, and it does have, trying to remember about cores. It definitely has army markers. I'm going to move a fan here just a second. We're rapidly approaching the time when I won't need to run the air conditioner up here, but I get overheated easily because I'm fat. And, I got this big hot computer going, and I'm drinking and talking, and it's all sweaty stuff. Gorizia 1916, Just a Guard mentions. Is that one of those Polish games? I do not remember which game. A Time for Trumpets is absolutely a monster. It's a 5-map game. It's big by any reasonable standard. It is absolutely a monster. In fact, it's the biggest bulge game that I'm aware of in terms of footprint. The other bulge games that I can think of, like, for example, Wacht am Rhein, either version of Wacht am Rhein, are also battalion-level bulge games, but Wacht am Rhein is 4 maps. Time for Trumpets is 5. Achilles says he's not a fan of the combat resolution system in War Between the States. I actually kind of liked the combat resolution system, although I don't think it always came together quite like it was supposed to. I like the basic idea. It was very nice today, by the way, and not at all hot here in Ohio. Yeah, so Daniel Berger says 3,000. BGG says 3,000 minutes for Steel Wolves. I absolutely. There's a lot of things that you can learn from looking at things on Board Game Geek. The playtime, I think, is the most casual possible guess, and I would set no stock in it whatsoever. So there is not an in-studio audience, Harold. So I will mention, I did already mention it, but let's talk about it again. We do have the San Diego Historical Games online convention coming up the weekend of November 11th. It starts, I believe, on the 12th. They already have quite a few events, so go check that out if you are interested. And if you're into miniatures, you can go and investigate Historicon as well, but I have not really into that, so I don't really have any information on it. So next up, what do we got here next is... Actually, that was the last picture. Well, these were the pictures I could find anyway. So... Now, there were some folks playing Battle for Normandy at... because I watched Just a Guard's video at GMT's Weekend at the Warehouse, which is a 3-day event. So... Oh, geez. A Federation and Empire is a monster game without Starfleet battles to resolve the battles, frankly. The only thing... So, I don't have a picture of this, but you can find pictures of it on BGG, of Death Ride Kursk, which is basically Kursk at the platoon level. That's pretty insane, and it's got an enormous, enormous footprint. Might be the biggest pure map footprint that I have seen. It's definitely bigger than Case Blue. Atlantic Wall, by the way, is close, but Case Blue's a bit bigger. Case Blue is basically 10 maps. That's a little bit of an oversimplification because they're not all full-size maps, but Case Blue is basically 10 maps. And Atlantic Wall is, I think, basically 7 maps. Yeah, I do not consider the playtime on the box is something I don't look at. To be honest, I mean, I go into it with a sense of how long it's going to take me to play the thing before I buy it. To be honest, well, they didn't finish Battle for Normandy in 4 days. I could play into the end of the scenario, although they could easily get to a sudden death victory. It's very easy to get to trigger. At least in the old game, it was very easy to trigger the Allied sudden death victory condition on June 12th. Bit too easy, if you ask me, actually. Matt Davidson mentions Operation Typhoon. That's an old big SPI game. I think that's 3 maps, if I'm not mistaken. Also, density's not off the charts on that, as I recall. But it's not a low density game, right? It's not Europa either. Hethwill says if a CRT has factors over 4 to 1, it is a monster. I think he's trying to be funny, because I do not think that is a credible way to judge whether it's a monster or not. I mean, by that standard, some really compact games like Holland 44 are monster games. Or Russian Campaign. Russian Campaign has columns over 4 to 1. And I don't think Russian Campaign is a monster either. So, we always used to joke about Europa Fest having that happen, Board Game Bloke, where you'd go in on Thursday and you'd go in again on late Saturday when they were pretty much done, and you wouldn't really see that the front had moved very much. On the other hand, and maybe that was a real thing, and maybe that was in our imaginations, not being as familiar with it. There have been attempts to play out the whole war with the Der Weltkrieg series, and God, that's big. If you do it, that's really big. But I think the appeal in Der Weltkrieg is playing the smaller components of that, some of which individually can actually be quite large. The East Front, if you play the whole East Front package together, for example, it's quite large. I have pictures of that set up, actually. We didn't play it, but we set the maps up just to get a sense of what kind of table space we needed for it. And you can fit it on 2 8-foot tables. Stigler, I won't go that far, but I definitely have a predilection for longer, heavier games. So, if people want to play an hour game, or even something like Fort Sumter, for example, which you can absolutely play in 20 or 30 minutes, great. I'm cool with that. I didn't really. I bought the digital version of Fort Sumter, and I've played it a few times, and I might play it again. I don't know, but I'm not burning to play it again. On the other hand, I will absolutely be delighted to play Empire of the Sun a bunch more. So, now here's another thing that I have mentioned in the past, and I don't know, I may be kind of, from the Wargame content creator perspective, I may be the only one saying this kind of thing, but I spent a lot of years doing role-playing stuff where the expectation is you would get together every week with your buddies and you would play, and then you would all go home, and then the next week you would come over and do it again, and you would have campaigns where you would play the same game, right, same characters and all that for 3 months or 6 months or a year and a half, right? I think our longest campaign ever ran about 3 years. That sounds approximately correct. And in that sense, the only difference between that and a monster war game is you got to leave it set up, right? RPG, you can just pack it all up and everybody goes home. The war game, you got to leave set up, unless you're doing it in Vassal, in which case you just leave it set up virtually, and Bob's your uncle, right? So, thanks for the offer, John. I really do appreciate it. But my problem is finding the time right now. So, Jordan McMullen, thanks for stopping by. You guys really took your time with that DAC game, though. So, I mean, I can't quibble with that. And you guys were, or at least you were learning to play OCS at the time too, which will absolutely slow you down. And frankly, OCS is a game at which one can play at a glacial pace. The big ASL campaign game, so the biggest one I'm aware of which does not count the third-party ones, so like the some of the critical hit stuff is bigger than this, would be the Red Factories set, where you're playing Red Barricades and Red October together. That'd be 4 maps with quite high density, a lot of units. That would take a long time to play. Ken Cloby mentions 1914 Offensive à Outrance, which Callendale has just started playing. So if you want to see some commentary on that, check that out. That was almost what I was going to be clipping tonight, actually. Except then I realized I got like a bunch of stuff boxed up over here, while I figure out what shelving solution is going to look like. And that is actually in the boxed stuff. So we will not be clipping Offensive Outrance tonight. We have mentioned Federation and Empire, totally a monster game. There are scenarios of Fed and Empire, so you can play a shorter, doesn't take a million years game of Fed and Empire. But if you play like the whole General War or something like that, that's totally a monster game by itself. You do not need to fight the battles out with SFB to make that a monster. It is a monster on its own. John Keyports, every good war game, I think, has something to say that the designer put into the game, okay? So if you are receptive to that message, right, not necessarily to the point of agreeing with it, but to the extent of grasping that there is a particular perspective in this game, then you do not have to have a big game to learn any of those lessons. And in fact, you might learn more lessons if you play a bunch of little games rather than one huge S game. That is exceptionally credible. Doug Sunset mentions Imperial Starfire. I think the version of it that I had was the Imperial Starfire version. That's totally, if you run that thing, ooh boy, that's the kind of thing that really should be computerized. It is very detailed. It's a campaign game generator for Starfire, which Starfire plays super fast and easy, but the Imperial Starfire is like one of the most complicated sets of campaign rules for a tactical system that I've ever seen. Wise Guy History, thanks for stopping by. He has got a bunch of good quality video on things like Time for Trumpets and The Last Blitzkrieg, which, let's see here. Cool, Denant. Give me a second to pull that up. Denant is the ASL historical campaign that is included in the latest version of Croix de Guerre. So I'm trying not to mispronounce it too bad. Eventually this will show up. 3 Days of Gettysburg. Yeah, it takes a long time to play. The great thing about 3 Days of Gettysburg, and indeed with most Gettysburg games, is that even if they're going to take you a long time to play, they don't take a long time to set up, because by time-hallowed tradition, they all start with Harry Heath marching onto the map. There's not much to set up. even in a big one like 3 Days of Gettysburg, where it's a regimental game. So confused. Crown of Roses. I've got that. We tried to play it. We kind of struggled through it once. I'd like to give that another try at some point. Joe Faust mentions beer and pretzels. That's a good topic idea. I may not be the person to talk about that, but maybe that means I should talk about it. So we have Hemadad. Thanks for stopping by. We have mentioned the Grognard Simulations Death Ride Kursk and Death Ride Normandy series. Kursk is all done. Normandy is in progress. There's, I think, Omaha and Utah, and not Utah, Omaha and Juneau and Point du Hoc are out right now, I believe. So One True Phlegm mentions SPI's Objective Moscow. So if you don't remember that game, by the way, I recommend at least looking it up on BGG, because it's an interesting looking game. It's about the fall of Soviet communism, where basically, if you're a member of Asian America, where everybody invades America, it's the opposite of that, where everybody invades the Soviet Union, and as a big hex and counter monster game too. So like the Chinese are invading, and the whole map is like the entire Soviet Union. It's an interesting looking game. I don't know if it's good, but it is definitely interesting, and I'm unaware of any comparable game on the subject. Achilles says a nice operational game that doesn't take longer to play than the actual war. Well, we've played a lot of big operational games that don't take longer than the actual war, but that doesn't necessarily, it does take us more than 6 weeks to play through Blitzkrieg Legend, for example. Which is not the fastest playing OCS game, by the way. Let's see. I've already mixed these up. Daniel Berger asks about Streets of Stalingrad. That's a tricky question, because every version of Streets of Stalingrad is a different size. The L2 version is the biggest one, and I think it's 4 maps. It's very large. Stigler says Objective Moscow has a record for unwieldy density. Having played Europa, I might not agree with that. I don't know. I have spoken with no one who has played Objective Moscow. So, John Longshore, thanks for stepping by. But I have played, at this point, 2 games of Europa, so... And we're about to start a third. We will be starting War in the Desert tomorrow, hopefully. Descent on Crete, yeah. That is another one of those games that kind of falls into, according to many, the monster category. The Dark Valley is another one. Dark Valley has... you have like a continuous front line, so there's a lot of counters, but the stacking limit's not super high, so you don't have massive stacks. But it is a 2-map game. It's a big game. I am not going to try to convince anybody that the Dark Valley should not be considered a monster game. All right. The Next War. So when we say Next War, I always feel obligated to specify which Next War I'm talking about. Whether I'm talking about NATO, the Next War in Europe, the Victory Games Classic, recently released, re-released, or reimagined by Compass, which is very good, by the way, or The Next War, which is the James Dunnigan developer Mark Herman game from 1980 or 81 or 79 or something like that, or the GMT Next War series, which I have, and which we've played a short scenario of India-Pakistan, and it's another one of those things that we want to get back to at some point. I do think it's kind of where it's at as far as series goes for hypothetical near future now conflicts, as opposed to hypothetical near future in the 70s or 80s conflicts, which is where a lot of these other this whole revival of Cold War gone hot, the space that exists in. Just to guard the Gargamella scenario, I mean, you can play that in a sitting, though. I mean, that's the thing with if you look at the scenario victory conditions and you look at the route points, you might be thinking, yeah, it's going to take a long time to play this, but you always know who's going to lose well before that point. So I don't think I mean, there's a lot of pieces. Pharsalis is way bigger out of Hoplite, by the way. It's way bigger. That, aside from the set piece games like Elysia, which you could call a monster, and Caesar and Alexandria, which I don't think is a monster, but it would still take you a little bit of time to play. I think the closest thing to monster that GBOH has to offer is Pharsalis. But there's some really big battles in the Japanese games too, and there's a couple of really big battles in the Devil's Horseman. So yeah, the Thin Red Line games, so there's the big games, the operational games, and then there's the tactical games, the Dogs of War in those. Those are not that big, but if you put them all together, then you'll end up with a big 5-map thing, and that turns into something that's pretty big. Stigler, I agree. All 5 Central Front games. I mean, that's the same type of thing, right? The Thin Red Line folks. Are definitely trying to work in that same space as the SPI designers were with the Next War and the Central Front series. Even though the Dogs of War, whatever that series is called, that mechanically is, as far as I can tell, pretty different from Central Front. But the scope is definitely very similar. Perfidious Albion. So it's interesting that you should mention the East Front series from Vance von Boris. For one thing, I'll mention this again, the new version of Barbarossa Army Group Center is at the printer. We should see that soonish. And by soonish, I mean sometime in the next 6 months. Do not place any wagers on when GMT's next boat will arrive. Could be tomorrow, could be in May. Nobody knows. So, but I think that I'm fortunate in that I have all of the great GBOH games except for the Line of the North, which I would buy. If I were to see it for like $25 on eBay, I would get it. But it's a game that has been replaced, as far as I'm concerned, by the Musket and Pike series from GMT. So I don't feel hugely obliged to go run it down for a bunch of money. Just to guard, I don't know if it was in your video or somebody else, but I did see there was a bunch of out-of-print stuff floating around at the weekend at the warehouse. So, Alan Salazar, this is a great question, actually. What subject deserves a monster but hasn't gotten one yet? That is a great, great topic. The rise and decline of the Roman Empire. So picture your Imperium Romanum, but covering the entire 1,500-year history of the Roman Republic and Empire. It would be very difficult to do. I'm not sure it's even possible, but I think definitely is a topic that is worthy of a big monster game. Okay, let's get... We actually have water here with us tonight, so... Perfidious Albion mentions... Actually, Stigler, we know where the ships are. You can literally track the ships. Some companies have said, hey, here's our boat, and you can then look up the name of the boat and see where it is. So we know where it is. It's just a matter of getting it docked and unloaded, and then whatever they unload through customs. All right, let's see if this picture has shown up now. It has not. Well, hopefully that'll show up at some point. Mongol Conquest might make for an interesting game. I feel like that would make for a better one-session game, though, actually. John Stanley mentions Winfield Scott's March on Mexico City in 1847. That's interesting. I don't know a lot about the Mexican War. We are, by the way, going to stop clipping. There was a question coming into the stream, well, coming into tonight, I suppose, of whether there was going to be clipping on this stream, because I burnt my hand in the kitchen fairly badly yesterday. But it is not exact, and it is like right in the crook of the knuckle, but it's not exactly where I'm gripping the clipper, so it's actually fine. Achilles, the game you're thinking of is almost certainly Imperium Romanum 2, but it's all separate scenarios. It's not there's not a campaign game. There have been attempts to put a campaign game together. Jason W, Three Kingdoms period of ancient China. This is another really interesting topic. There are a couple of games on it, published by Chinese publishers. So you are on your own researching those things. But a couple of them, from looking at the pictures on BGG, look relatively interesting. So Carl Creeder from the Wargame Bootcamp is here. Now there is Daniel Berger mentions Rise of the Roman Republic. So that is the first in a series of games by Richard Berg called The Ancient World, and I'm actually a big fan of that series. The two games that were released are Rise of the Roman Republic, which is got a couple oddball scenarios, but the big scenario, the campaign scenario, is the Samnite Wars, which is relatively early Republic stuff. Which is more interesting than you may think. Then the second game in the series was Carthage, the First Punic War. But of course, the First Punic War is not really the Punic War anybody wants to see. People want to see Punic War with Hannibal and the elephants and all that. There's a lot less concern about the First Punic War. Now, it happens that the First Punic War was more interesting than people think, too. This is the same thing with the Crusades. To me, the interesting crusade is not the Third Crusade with Richard the Lionhearted and Saladin and all that stuff. The interesting crusade is the First Crusade, in my opinion. There's a couple of S&T entries on ancient China. There's not much, and I don't know if it's Three Kingdoms period as such. There's also this is what I threw out as an option, is Richard Berg's Dynasty, which I think is not available through Hollandspiel anymore. I thought that was for licensing reasons, and it may have been due to component expense reasons instead, but I believe it is not available. That's an interesting looking game. I don't know that I'd consider it a historical game exactly. We got chariots in here too. Okay. Chancellorsville. Well, Stegler, you're our resident great campaigns, great battles of the American Civil War guru. So get on that. I will be delighted to buy a Great Battles of the American Civil War Chancellorsville game. It is an interesting battle. It is not an especially one-sided battle. Well, it kind of is, because Burnside was an idiot, but a human player is probably not going to behave as Burnside did. I think I put in a bid on a copy of Art of Siege once, and I thought I bid pretty high, and I got my pants blown clean off. It's not Antioch, it's Acre. The decision, Jeff Anderson says that the Decision Middle Kingdoms game is based on Britannia, not a monster. Well, that evaporates any possible interest. I know people are conflicted about Richard Berg. There are people that hate Richard Berg. They hate something about him personally, and they extend that to his designs. But I think Berg, regardless of which, and I had zero personal contact with Richard Berg, so that's clear. He had some designs where he clearly lost track of what a good game needs. And he had other designs, whether they were because he realized it at the time, whatever, that are really brilliant designs. I have Onward Christian Soldiers and have played it and consider it a very good game. It is the best game that I have seen. It is the best game that I have played on the First Crusade. I have Kingdom of Heaven. I haven't played that. I have the First Crusade Solitaire game from S&T that released in S&T 299, I think, and that is busted unless you download the expanded rules from the website, which includes the siege rules, which you need to make the game work at all. So there's that. Doug mentions, and he's right, that the four sieges in Art of Siege are in vastly different periods, vastly different militaries. It is an interesting thing about that quad that the battles are very different. Chariots. I hope I didn't lag out again. I will not argue that Berg was hit and miss. I think that's fair. Berg had many misses. I think there's more good Berg designs than bad Berg designs, but there's no particular shortage of bad Berg games, I don't think. And I think that was generally due to lack of strong development. So a couple of Winterfests ago, some fellas had the Compass Franco-Prussian War game on the table. The actual title of which eludes me, but it's based on a derivative of the Victory Games Civil War system, and they had not strong on whether it was awesome or not good at the end. They didn't hate it, but they absolutely did not fall in love with it either. So that's my input on those. Now that 1866 Germany game, that looks pretty interesting, and I've heard good things about it. But I've also seen people at a convention trying to play it and struggling with the rule book. So it might be one of those games that... but then again, if you're interested in that topic, that's generally a hassle I'm willing to put up with. Up to a point, right? I think that Franco-Prussian War game from Compass, I think, is limited stock. I think. Don't quote me on that. Onward to Paris. That is the name of it, in fact. I still don't know what I'm going to pick up at. All right, so I think we got disconnected there briefly, but I think we are reconnected now. Please let me know if there's any problems in the chat. Once again, 104 watching. We've had over 100 quite a few times, actually. Let me pull up... oh, for shit's sake. I forgot to put out the social media posts. Some of them are automated, but not all of them. There we go. 106 right now is what this says, actually. That's pretty good. Looks like we had 115, which is for me having forgot to send out the social media post. That's not bad. I think that's not a record, though. I'd have to check. We'll look at that at the end of the show. I've gotten out of the habit of telling what everybody the numbers are, telling everybody what the numbers are. There is a sale on Compass's website right now, by the way. I've had a lot of people say that Siege of Jerusalem is a pretty big game, and I find that believable. So, well, OBS disconnected me, so apparently it was so slow. Bayonet Brant is in the house. Thanks for stopping by. And he's right. Yes, please give the video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel and all that jazz. If you'd like to help support Ardwulf Lair, please do check out the links in the video description to the Patreon, the merch store, and the Ko-Fi. Your help and assistance is much appreciated. And I'm not going to tell you I don't buy games with that money, because I do, but I also do things like pay for streaming services like I for like Restream, for example, although we moved away from Restream, and pieces of new equipment and stuff like that. Achilles mentions a grand game on the rise of the Persian Empire. That's a great and untouched topic, actually. So, Yeah, say hi to Matt for me as well. Actually, I knew Matt from way back when he was involved with somebody. I forget who. So, in general, and I guess this should not surprise anybody. Games on Asian, and we've talked about this before. Asian and Muslim topics are not well represented by Western wargame designers. So, and that's too bad. There's some really real missed opportunities there, and some obvious missed opportunities. Right? It's not like we didn't get involved in World War II, right? But yet there are a depressingly small number of games about the Second Sino-Japanese War. I've complained about this many times. There's a lot of elephants here. Which, hey, it's India. That shouldn't be surprising. Oh, cool. So, very briefly back to the Ancient World series. I wouldn't consider any of those monster games. That said, the big campaigns, the Samnite Wars and the First Punic War, are not small games as such. Well, I've got the First Jihad from White Dog 2, which is a good game, by the way. But there's not that many. Oops, let's make sure. Yeah, okay. There's not that many examples. Just a Guard, awesome. That's great. Yeah, I saw your Seljuk game. That's an interesting topic as well. So the Ancient World. So the long-awaited and long a development hell third volume in the series was going to be Thunderbolt, the Second Punic War, which, again, is the one everybody wanted. And then Berg, didn't get it done and passed away, but Mark Herman and Alan Ray are literally working on it. Oh, yeah, and we got to talk about the Channel of the Week as well. So let's get to that. So we should see Thunderbolt, come out at some point. I mean, at this point, don't count on it this year. But you're not going to see it this year. Let me be clear on that. I think it's unlikely you'll see it in 2022, but 2023 I think is a possibility. So the Channel of the Week is Jamie Cribbs. He has like 40 subscribers and he's got about a dozen videos. And they're really good. So go check that out. There's a link in the video description. So Nathan Landrum says, and I've been thinking about this. So one of the gaps that I often identify is operational ancients. There's not that many examples. There are a few. There's the Ancient World series. There's Imperium Romanum really falls into this category as well. There's that Trajan series from Decision does not have an amazing reputation. Yeah, Jeff, I think you found the three that exist. That's the thing. But I would love to see, and people ask me about this all the time, is what's the GCACW of Napoleonics, or what's the GCACW of American Revolution, and there are no direct analogs. But I will tell you this. I picked up on their sale, I picked Washington's Crossing up. By the way, Revolution Games, those two new pre-order games from Revolution Games are like already shipping, by the way. So they're hustling on that. On their sale, I picked this up, and looking through it, I am very impressed with this. This looks really interesting. Again, operational American Revolution. There is, again, kind of a hybrid scale in 1776, but there's not a lot on that scale. There's quite a few games on the battles. But, operational is my sweet spot anyway. So the closest thing we have to operational American Revolution is probably that, and that's with Volume 1 in a series. I don't know if there's a Volume 2. I don't think there is. But I'd be super interested if a Volume 2 were to appear. For Napoleonics, I think the closest thing we have is the Campaigns of Napoleon system, the Kevin Zucker operational series. The Library of Napoleonic Battles has a little bit of operational flavor because of the scale, but I would call it grand tactical rather than operational. Justigard mentions, so I've heard, I haven't had the chance to play Atlantic Chase yet, but that trajectory system from Atlantic Chase could be adapted to a number of things, and I find that very credible. So Half-Ass Gaming asks if anyone is excited about anything in the Compass Holiday catalog. So for me, no, but there's a whole bunch of stuff coming from Compass that I'm pretty excited about. War for America, and I've talked about this before. War for America, I'm very excited about. The Third World War series from Frank Chadwick, I'm really interested in that. I actually just picked up Washington's War at Origins, which is the sort of updated version of We the People. That is a strategic game, though. That is not operational. There's not that many games on the War of 1812, but I will tell you that 1812 War on the Great Lakes Frontier, also from Compass and designer Ken Reppel. I've talked to Ken about that. The game looks really pretty neat. I am very interested in seeing how that turns out. That's one of my, say, half dozen top picks from upcoming Compass stuff. Now, as far as... I'll tell you what. I was like, okay, the War Pacific just came out. I'm going to buy the whole thing, right? I'm going to buy the War Pacific, and the expansion. And then I looked at it. It's like, oh, I'm going up there. Maybe I'll just wait. So I decided I was going to wait, and like literally the next day, they were sold out of the expansion. So I don't know if I'm going to end up investigating that or not. I have looked at the Victory, look interesting too, and I mean, I've leafed through that event book in Absolute Victory, and that thing alone is almost worth $115 that the game costs, because that event book is amazing. Doug's right. It is an odd topic that I mean, Vietnam is the same way, right? Where the nature of the conflict makes it harder to draw a sharp dividing line between strategic and operational. And that just, where that line is drawn in any given game is pretty much up to the designer of that game. War for the Union, I've heard good things about. I feel like I have enough strategic level. Okay, so let me work this through. Strategic level Civil War games. Okay, I had and did own, but got rid of the Decision War Between the States. If you are concerned, which is out of print now, right? But you can get it for not a ton of money. It's a 3-map monster. Its chiefest problem is it's one of those things that where at the end of the game it all kind of worked. But its chiefest problem is the activation system, which makes for boring play, because you end up with a lot of shitty leaders that really have a hard time activating, but you have a lot of turns because the turns are functionally weekly. So it all ends up working out, and your leaders end up covering a historically plausible amount of ground in a whatever given amount of time. But it makes for unengaging play when you roll. First of all, you got to roll for every leader. You can spend points, but sometimes you get 0 points. And if I'm drawing the chit, we get 0 and there's a 0 in the cup, we're getting 0 points. So that was literally uncanny the way that happened when we were playing War Between the States. So you end up having to make rolls for a huge number of leaders each turn. And the way it generally worked for us playing as the Union, we got a surplus of bad leaders, right? You'd end up rolling 30 times, and you'd get like 2 or 3 activations, because most of your leaders have like 1s and 2s. For him to actually fight, then you have to roll a second time to that leadership check, and he has to roll a 1 again. I did manage to pull that off once in the entire game. And we played that to the end as well. So I'm not sure that would be interesting. I don't know enough about the French and Indian War, which is unfortunate because it's like really the only war that happened like right here, right? Where I grew up, there is at least one game on the Chinese Civil War. Do I still have? I think I still have that. That is I think it's called Chinese Civil War. It's a 3W game. End of Empire is an interesting looking game, actually, and I would really like to see more about that. And it covers both the American Revolution and the French and Indian War, which is itself kind of interesting. I mean, like I said, at the end of like the year or the season, you got results that looked very historically plausible. It just wasn't fun to play, right? I mean, at the end of a Combat Commander game, you get something that was very historically plausible, but you end up with, having taken a third of your turns, simply discarding all your cards, which I don't think is fun. So, like I said, I don't know enough about it. I feel like the only things I just don't know enough about it. So the Manila game is going to be lower density but more map space than the Red October. It'll be fewer units, but more map space. So those battles for the American Revolution, that's the Mike Miklos series from GMT. That's got a really good reputation. I've got the tri-pack. And at some point I will get those to the table. They are well-regarded games, I can tell you that. Ooh, there's a lot of elephants. Again, it's India, so I guess we're not surprised. I ordered a pack of tweezers from Amazon, a 5-pack of tweezers, and this is not the biggest one. They're all different sizes. This was the biggest one that I found. The biggest one might end up being doubling as a tool for the barbecue, actually, because it's really stupidly big. See how this works. I've never actually picked counters up with this. It kind of works okay, sort of, not really. Alright, we appear to be having some problems again. This is a set. I have about 5 of these. I have 3 or 4 of these, and I cannot find any of them except this one. These were bought from the gamers years ago when they were still at Origin. This is another one of those sets from Amazon. These are pretty good, actually. These are the ones that come on Amazon. They're about $10. They come with a stupid little flashlight. I got rid of that. But these are pretty good. I like them. This is the set that looks basically identical to the old Gamers ones that I bought this from Amazon. These were only about $3. I've got to bend these up a little bit to make them make sense. They're a little narrow, and the tines do not bend in quite enough. I really want them to bend in just a little bit. And this is another one of that 5-piece set. This is probably the smallest of the bunch. It is. And I am not clear on whether these will be useful for wargaming or not. This pair will work. And the whole 5-piece set was like $10. So, however, my favorite tweezers are these. So what these are a pair of actual surgical tweezers that somebody bought a bunch of them and made like a brace that they fit into a vise to bend them in exactly this way. And these bend inward, as you can see. They bend inward just a little bit so that you can pick up stacks of counters without picking every counter except the bottom counter, chopsticks would work very poorly. Just so you know. At least as good as, I mean, I'm okay with chopsticks, but not that good. So that's my tweezer story. At some point, tweezers, just so you know. But I'm working on. That's why I ordered like 3 sets of tweezers from Amazon, just to see what was available and where to get these from. But somebody that we know is custom made ones, and those are my favorites. Easy to do badly though. So, all right. So, Monstrous of monster games. So I'm gonna look up War in the East. Second edition 76. Yeah, War in the East, first edition 74. So that makes my putative statement correct, that the first monster war game is Dragnok Austin. And I think Untenscheiden came out either in the same year or in the following year. Untenscheiden is this. So Dragnok Austin covers up to from June of 41 up to April, I think, or so of 42, something like that. March or April, something like that. And then Untenscheiden covers from whatever that cutoff date is up to about mid 44. There was to have been a third volume in the series called Götterdämmerung that was going to cover the end of Untenscheiden to the end of the war, and that never got published. Now, GDW later on in the early 80s went and revised them. That's where Fire in the East comes from. Fire in the East is the revised version of Dragnok Austin, and Scorched Earth is the revised version of Untenscheiden. And I don't know if Scorched Earth covers all the way to the end of the war or not. So, counters. It just happens. But I am, as good with tweezers as anybody, really. OSG Napoleonic Game Adventures. I haven't played as many of them as I would like. I've played some of the Spanish scenarios, and I've played Quatre Bras. At some point, we've got a whole, the whole shelf back here. At some point, which reminds me that I need to order the 2 games that are on pre-order right now, which are Napoleon in the Quadrilateral, which is early Italian campaign, and the new version of Four Lost Battles, which will be nice to have that brought up to the current graphical standards, which are really nice. I have seen the counter slids offered by Red, well, maybe I haven't. Are those the same counter slids that OSG offers? Because you can get those directly from the manufacturer, but you actually get a little better deal on them buying them from OSG. Oh, that good point. Alan Salazar mentions a new movie that just came out called The Forgotten Battle. It is available on Netflix in the U.S., and it is a, I believe, Dutch production about the Battle of the Scheldt, which is an undertreated topic, even in, Western war games. Well, that's because the Canadians fought the battle, I think, rather than the Americans or even the British. But it looks really good, and I'm hearing good things about it. I do remember the magnetic counter clips. In fact, the old Shield Laminations counter clips were manufactured here, or at least the company. I don't know that they were manufactured here in Columbus, Ohio, but the company that sold them was here in Columbus, Ohio. So I've never really used them, and I'm concerned about So the old ones, if the counters were double-sided, you'd have issues. And the newer ones kind of clip on the sides of the counters, and I'd be concerned about those causing, A, concerned about spacing on a dense map, and B, concerned about them wearing poorly on the counters. Yeah, not really. No, I mean, no campaign is well covered by ASL because ASL doesn't cover campaigns. ASL covers small scale engagements and sometimes bigger battles or hunks of bigger battles. The Scheldt campaign went on for weeks. I don't believe. I mean, I think there is. I don't doubt that you're right that there are ASL scenarios that cover it, but you're not getting uh, a campaign level view of that if you played in ASL. And there is the Brian Train Schelt campaign game from Hollandspiel. That's one of the few that I can think of. Oh, it's big. It's real big, and I didn't realize that it was that big originally. Even the original was really big. I'm not planning on ordering that at this time, but only because I feel like I have ample East Front operational options, and I don't necessarily need Jack's latest thinking on the topic of Coruscant Pockets specifically, and it's really expensive. That's not to try to discourage anybody else, but I mean, I've got tons of OCS on the East Front. I've got the whole East Front series, except for Army Group Center, which is coming. I've got, different scales of East Front stuff, so I feel like I'm pretty much covered. We have, according to OBS, we have dropped several times, and I'm not sure what's up with that. So, but yet no one is complaining, so I guess I'll just keep my mouth shut. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. That's that was Hollandspiel's first game, wasn't it? That's a good point. I didn't think of that. My last acquisition from Hollandspiel was Empire at Sunrise, which looks really neat. So, very interested in taking a closer look at that. I don't know. That runs off of YouTube, right? So if my internet hiccups, it doesn't affect the chat in any way. I went for months with literally no connectivity problems whatsoever. And it doesn't look like I've dropped for a long period at any point tonight, so that's good, I guess. But sorry for the technical problems. Blame my internet service provider, which is Wide Open West. So probably time to revisit the topic of that service, actually. I literally haven't had connection issues for a long time, and until literally the last couple of weeks. So, there's every chance that it will go away at some point too. So it's not, my upstream bandwidth is way higher than I need for this kind of stream, or even for like a video game stream, which is more demanding. Ah, very good. Washington's Crossing looks super interesting. It's also not particularly expensive, so you're not sinking $1 billion into Washington's Crossing. So that is another attractive thing, and I do hope I hope that. So Marco Arnaudo did a video review on that, which I watched, so I have some idea of how it works. It does look like the system's a little bit fussy, but not fussy to the extent that it would bother me. I'm pretty comfortable with fussy. I mean, I play OCS, which is friggin' fussy. So I have high hopes for that series, and would definitely like to see more stuff at that scale. You're not really going to fight the whole war on that scale, right? That's not something that I think would be practical. Or for that matter, people occasionally talk about a whole war, great campaigns, the American Civil War, handling the whole war with that system, which would be neat, but I mean, it's really not what the system is designed to do, and I think it would be a slog. That said, you do have almost the entire Eastern Theater of the American Civil War on the maps already. There's a few gaps, but not many. If you are inclined to order Hanut, which is the latest issue of World at War magazine game, it's the mini Gauss game that's designed as an intro to Gauss. I do advise ordering it as soon as possible. I expect that it will sell out, just so you know. As far as its availability in Canada, I have no idea. There's retailers in Canada that you can go through if you don't want to pay $1 billion. Oh, by the way, MMP has introduced a FedEx international shipping option, which may save folks money on international shipping from MMP. So some of the time at least. So hopefully that will prove to be a viable option. Couple things should be on their way here. What's that called? Rising Sun. We have an order in for that. That ought to be making its way here relatively soon. I do have. I'll talk about this. I'll mention. Hopefully, remember to mention it again. I'm not sure where the stream with Dan is this week because I didn't look it up before this stream. So I think it's on Dan's channel this week, I think. Dan has the Charles S. Roberts Awards video presentation for November 11th. I think it's November 11th, which is the start of Compass Expo. I have decided I am not commenting further on the Charles S. Roberts Awards until the Charles S. Roberts Awards are announced, and then I'm sure I will have some things to say. At this point, I don't know that I have anything to add that wouldn't be purposeless bitching. And I don't know that would be particularly good. Well, John McLeod asks, what retailers in the U.S. carry decision mags with games? Miniature Market does, and Cool Stuff has in the past. As far as I can tell, Cool Stuff is phasing out everything except Magic cards and Pokemon cards and stuff. So, I mean, you can check, and hopefully they'll have stuff, but I have no idea. Miniature Market is where I would go. They seem to actually be interested in carrying games that I would buy. So I mean, I would assume. Okay, so first of all, what I've been calling Hanout is in Belgium. So it's not even French, but I would assume it's pronounced something like Anu. But, we'll leave it to actual Belgians to tell me how it's pronounced. Like I said, I have not had much in the way of problems. NWS does send shipping notices. So that is a relatively new development, by the way. They didn't used to, but they have for some time now. And I did get it because I complained about it like a month ago, and I have mentioned this already, that I did get my pending NWS order, which was 2 copies of Hood Strikes North. Miniature Market, if you order over $100, I think it's $100. They throw in free shipping, and if you're buying Wargames, it's very easy to come in over $100. So, and I do have wish lists over there. I just, got to catch up. They do RPG stuff as well, but I'm trying to limit Wargame expenditures too, and that's going just duckily, let me tell you. I mean, I did get the First to Fight for like $50, so I mean that's a really good price for that, especially in the kind of condition that it showed up in. Both of these things showed up in better condition than I thought I was going to get. I have a inside the box video on Fire in the East coming, which I might release. I don't know. There's a little bit of soiling on the counter sheets, which I believe to be mold. I'm going to try and wipe those off without ruining the counters. We'll see. I also wish Miniature Market would carry MMP. Cool Stuff used to carry MMP, but they don't seem to carry MMP anymore. And I can't tell them how to run their business. I can only tell them I was buying stuff from you guys when you carried these product lines, and now you don't, so I'm not. So, Iggy Critical, if you've got a long-standing order, send him an email. You can go through the customer service link on the webpage. He's very good about answering those things. I've tried not to climb. I mean, he had some really serious personal stuff happen. I made it I did not want to climb up his ass about my copy of Hood Strikes North, which certainly seems to be a really insignificant thing when you've just lost a parent and a spouse in the same, couple of months. So, but I did get my stuff. So, reach out to him, but don't get too agitated in the email is my advice. So, we have had 115 people in the stream tonight, which is a lot. So we have videos coming. Tomorrow, unless I get this done tonight, it ain't happening, which means it probably ain't happening. I do have another RPG video in the works, but I have to edit it, and which probably means if it didn't happen earlier, like over the weekend, it probably ain't happening now. That is a flip through of the giant slipcase set from Chaosium. I do have the Wednesday stream with Dan, which is at 6:30. Like I said, I think that's on Dan's channel this week, but don't quote me on that. It'll be in one of the two places. And then on Thursday, we have our unboxing. I don't remember what the unboxing video is for this week, but then we have like a second unboxing this week because I'm backed up on unboxings. This week's unboxing is it this one? Yes, it's Commands and Colors Napoleonics, the Prussian Army box. And then we have a buddy unboxing of the Great Patriotic War, which I think is coming on Friday. I'm actually a week ahead on uploading this and editing this stuff not right now just because, like I said, I'm really behind. So I've got a huge backlog of unboxing videos to release, so I'm going to double up for a couple of weeks. So I would pronounce it Ypres, but I mean that's not how they pronounce it locally, and the British do pronounce it wipers. So, or so I am told. I looked for Europa stuff on Noble Knight, and they do have a few things, but I'm not paying $500 for a copy of Second Front. That just ain't happening. A punched copy went for a punched and unverified copy went for $200, which is not a bad price, but unboxing. There is an unboxing of RAF coming. Yes, there is. I've actually filmed that unboxing twice. The Buddy unboxing, which was filmed like a year ago and is still sitting in the backlog. And then there was the one that I just bought at Origins, which is probably the one you will see soonish. So, yeah, but I mean, I got all the Commands and Color stuff, and I didn't do unboxings for everything, but I did unboxings for a lot of it. So, plus, the Peloponnesian War showed up. Haven't done the unboxing. I mean, it's filmed. I got to edit it and upload it. So the way these things happen is, I film it, and then it goes in a folder, and then when I need an unboxing video, I just grab something out of the folder and edit it, which is light editing, but it still takes, it takes probably 5 minutes plus the length of the video to do it, and then rendering time, which I don't have to babysit particularly. I can walk away and go get a donut, but it's usually about half an hour worth of total work to do an unboxing video. To do the editing, I should say. To do the unboxing video is usually depends on how long it is. Some of my unboxings are 5 minutes or less. Sometimes they're 30 minutes, but that's unusual for me. I tend to want to be done at that point. So, pulling up the Eep is how I've heard it pronounced as well. So, like I said, I do not vouch for local pronunciation. Looks like we are not going to hit a record tonight. 117 is the actual record. If I had sent out the social media posts on time, I might have hit that. Oh well. John Clark got his Rising Sun on Friday. So, Fucko put in an order at the last minute, like after they made last call. So we were probably the very last person to get the pre-order price. So it should be showing up. My guess is next week, something like that. I don't know. I don't know what their output is by day. Here's what I can tell you. Here's what. I mean, I worked on a picking and packing line at one point, right? So if you have your area set up properly with, your dunnage in it, like a dispenser and stuff like that, so you don't have to sit there and fool with the bags and things like that. Perfidious Albion, the game you want is Brotherhood and Unity by Compass. That is the best game on the subject. If you have that set up properly, and I was packing, you know, one game per box, which is how I would do it. I would hand all the single game orders to one person and have them just plow through them. I could probably do two a minute, and run hundreds of copies in a workday. But that, I don't know what their rest of their pipeline looks like, right? I mean, do they have them getting picked up? Do they put them on? Do they palletize them? I have no idea. So, the running joke was that they're being transported to the post office in the back of Brian's Civic. I do not vouch for the accuracy of that guess. That's a good point too. Not that we're trying to advertise this particularly, but the BCS Aracore game is on pre-order right now. The pre-order price is $69. It's one map, I think 2 counter sheets. It is going to be an ideal entry point to the BCS system. If you are interested in BCS, that is where you should go. And it needs, last I checked earlier today, it needed about 8 or 9. There was about 8 or 9 left to hit its number. So the sooner it hits its number, the sooner you'll actually get to see it. Brotherhood and Unity was done by Tomislav Chipchich, who's from that part of the world. So it's got a really good reputation. The difficulty is it's a 3-sided game, which means you need to rustle up 3 players for it, which also makes it a pretty unusual game, right? I mean, there's not a lot of 3-handed war games. Ken Globy would like to see Norway. So somebody did a video on the invasion of Norway that was a pretty big game. The alternative I could think of is like Europa's Narvik, but that's like the smallest Europa game in terms of like density and stuff. Misremembering my Chancellorsville. Maybe. No, I don't think so. Anyway. Yeah, I think Brotherhood and Unity is probably going to end up selling out as well. So, but it's been around for a little while now, so it's not, it did not sell out instantly, but it's gotten a lot of really positive attention, and it is a game on. There's very few games on that subject, right? So, I want to say there was a S&T game on the subject too, or possibly Modern War. But I might be misremembering that. I can't. I'm trying to remember who did the video on it, but there's another Norway game that I had my eye on at one point, and I'd be damned if I can remember who did the video on it. So Jeff says get GRD's Narvik. So here's the thing. GRD didn't do Narvik. GDW didn't. I'm going to be pedantic about this, but there's a reason. So you can get copies of. Don't go to eBay, right? If you go to eBay, well, you can haunt eBay and see if you can get a copy of Narvik, and you might be able to. There are a couple different editions of it. It is the smallest and possibly, debatably, most manageable Europa game. Okay, it is basically a battalion level game because of the nature of the forces that were up there. It's also on a different turn system than most of the Europa games. GRD revised it and included it in a significantly larger package called Storm Over Scandinavia. Now, I personally am kind of trying to get a copy of Storm Over Scandinavia, but I can't find a friggin' thing for less than like $250, and I'm not paying $200 for it. So You guys are right, of course. It was Hooker at Chancellorsville. So, but again, there's like no copies of it for sale at reasonable prices on BGG either. So I have looked around. I haven't looked at the Constant World Market. You can do that if you want. You can go to the Facebook Marketplace groups. Those are good places to go. 130 euros. Well, then you got to think about shipping it here, right? You really want to ship something from Europe here to all, the. I mean, assuming you're in the U.S. I don't know that I want to depend on international shipping right now. Is I guess what I'm saying with that. 130 euros is probably 150, something like that. I'm not running the conversion right now. It's not that important. But that's not such a bad price. I mean, it's a big package. It includes not just the Norway campaign, but it also includes like the Swedish Order of Battle if you want to invade Sweden in your hypothetical Grand Europa game. It does not include the Winter War with Finland. That is that is its own Europa game from GRD called A Winter War. And I haven't really seen copies of that floating around for prices I want to pay either. So But do keep an eye on BGG Marketplace though, because it's useful for a number of reasons. One, you get more reasonable, realistic prices than you do on eBay, which is dominated by crazy people right now, as far as I can tell. And you can easily look up historical sales, right? Of here's what this went for 6 months ago, and that by itself is useful, even if it wasn't, even if nobody was selling it. Narvik 1940. I don't know what that is. I'm pretty sure that's not the other Norway game I was thinking of, but I could be wrong. Is that the Vivictus game? Because that's definitely not the thing I was thinking of. Yeah, neither of these are the things I was thinking. There's two games called Narvik 1940, but one's from 2019. The other is from publisher Dragon, which appears to be in Polish. The 2019 game is a Vivictus game, or Vivictus. Don't want to embarrassingly forget my Latin pronunciations. This is a tactical game, though. So, I mean, if you're interested in that, cool. I would not be interested in that. Oh, this is interesting. So we can actually search for Narvik. I think this is the one I was thinking of. Let's check here. This is the one I was thinking of. Let me pull this up. All right, this is Operation Veserubung, the invasion of Norway. Somebody did video on this. This is by Grenier Games, and I believe it's a 2-mapper, maybe 2, maybe 3, something like that maps. Not what I'd call a monster, but if you're interested in this subject, there's really not that much. Videos. This is by who? This is by Jonathan Townsend, whose channel you should all be subscribed to, because he's done a lot of really good stuff over the years, by the way. Another thing, I friggin' hate... actually, that's a good question. Joe asks about a most fearful sacrifice, and whether that's a monster or not. Now, this is Herman Lettman's upcoming hybrid Gettysburg game, and I say hybrid because it's kind of based on the blind sword system, but it kind of moves it to a different scale. It's called the Black Swan system. It looks like a very promising game. I wouldn't call that a monster game, but a lot of people would. It's a big game. It's got a decent number of pieces. It's got a big map. It's going to take, more than a sitting to play through, I think, typically. I wouldn't call it a monster, but I think a lot of people would, and I'm not really seeing the value in arguing with people about what the definitions of monsters are, right? So circling back to that topic, though, really big games. That Death Ride Normandy, that's going to be a really big one. That thing's done, but it's not done yet. A lot of the decision stuff, the Goss stuff, well, at least Atlantic Wall. The other games are merely big. I have also Manders. I agree. You can absolutely get good deals on eBay, but you need to exercise patience. And I probably twitched a little too hard on this, but I didn't pay an arm and a leg for it, considering what it typically goes for. And frankly, considering that it's a 6-map 12 counter sheet game, that is a $300 game realistically now. So I can't really complain, and I'll tell you, it's in pretty, other than the little bit of moldy-ish bits, it really is in pretty good shape. War in the Pacific is a monster. So, I mean, that's another thing, though, that Joel... Oh, good call, Joel. Almost all these big monster games have scenarios, right? Now, there's a lot of people, and I have some sympathy for this position, that you really want to play the campaign. You really want to dive right in and play the campaign. And there's also a lot of room to play scenarios, right? So if you buy War... Now, the trouble with that is anybody going to spend $450 for the Decision War in the Pacific so they can play scenarios? I mean, I don't think so, based on what that will cost. I paid $180, I think, for SPI's War in the Pacific, and it has two small problems. One, there is one missing counter. It is a generic Japanese brigade. We talked about this in the video. And the box is... it would be easy to find a worse box, but the box is pretty bad. But, I'm not going to go through... Typically, the thing will run for 3. Says that S&T had an issue game covering the 10-day War of Slovenian independence, which predated the war covered in Brotherhood and Unity. That's a good catch on that. I cannot possibly keep track of that. I did mention earlier that I think in terms of the whole package, in terms of footprint, and not just map, but footprint, right? Because of the huge number of displays. I mean, in addition to, you cannot play that version of War in the Pacific on a ping pong table. You can get the map on the ping pong table, but you can't get you'd need another ping pong table for all the displays and the island maps and stuff like that. And it's probably going to take you 1,500 hours. There is the critical hit Omaha Beach stuff, which is huge. I gotta say it's huge. And free of any annoying semblance of playtesting, in all likelihood. Stalingrad, I mean, people have played that. People have played a lot of these big games, right? People have played, War in the East and Scorched Earth, Fire in the East and Scorched Earth, all the way to the end. People, allegedly the designer played that Decision War in the Pacific, a complete game of that. Now, I don't know what that looked like. I don't think that's credibly considered adequate playtesting, but we have also talked about Streets of Stalingrad. So the thing with Streets of Stalingrad is every version is bigger, right? There's a first edition, a second edition, and a third edition. The third edition, the L2 version, is which hit some kind of production hiccup or disintegration of the publisher or something like that, was going to be even bigger, because I've seen the map for that. That fella, I don't know if he's Ohio, but he's local enough that he has shown up at Winterfest with that enormous map a couple of times. So it's a very impressive map. I do feel like if I were interested, if I was in the market for a Streets of Stalingrad, I feel like the L2 version would be more than adequate. I believe that Streets of Stalingrad will fit on 2 standard 6-foot folding tables. Standard folding tables are 2.5 feet, and they're either 6 feet or 8 feet long. These are the rectangular ones, obviously, and I'm talking about the L2 version, which I have never owned it, but a couple copies have passed through my hands. And you know, I guess I might end up with one at some point, but I'm not interested enough in it to. I mean, if I want to do like street level Stalingrad stuff, I'll bust out red barricades or something like that. I'm satisfied with that. The Battle of Napoleon. I don't know what that is. I do know that Marco has done, might have been Battle for Normandy or the Dark Valley or something like that. I believe L2 is nominally still around. I don't know that they are active. And, I mean, I don't think they're out of business as such. I just don't think they're operational. Let me put it that way. I think they still had a website as of not that long ago. I can tell you that. On the other hand, if you Google L2 design, you're going to get some comic book artists or architects page. L2 Design Group does still have a web page, and they say we'll be offline for a few weeks upgrading to... they do have an About Us thing that looks like it might, in fact, have a bunch of stock pictures on it. Yeah, this is totally a not active website. With absolutely stock photo. You actually should check this out because it's actually hilarious. There's some L2 pictures, but everything else is stock photos. So that's hilarious. So yeah, I would not assume that L2 is a thing that exists anymore at this point. You don't say. I mean, you could reach out to some of those. Some of those folks are probably still around, so you could figure. Actually, where I would go to find out would probably be the group on the Constant World forum. Trevor Just, thanks for stopping by. We're about to. Yes, Art Lupinacci is supporting Russia Besieged. There is a Finland expansion coming for that. I'll tell you, Russia Besieged is pretty tempting. I've never owned nor played. No, I take that back. I have never played Russian Campaign. I have owned, and it's probably a thing that I should remedy. But at the same time, I don't know that I necessarily want to bother with the Avalon Hill version. So I might be just better off going for Russia Besieged, which is kind of a next-gen version of it. And, of course, I can grab it when I'm up there in a couple of weeks. So, yes, there was a new design of Streets of Stalingrad in development. There were development problems, which may have been, the team broke up like, the Eagles or something. I don't know. But I think there was some kind of friction where their agreement to publish fell apart. Don't quote me on any of that. I may have had inside information on that, to be honest, but it was a long time ago, and I don't want to necessarily impugn on anybody that might have been involved. Best Russian campaign game. That is a good topic. We're not going to talk about that tonight because we're about 3 minutes from being done. I have heard that about Russia Besieged. And, of course, Russian Campaign is a huge classic. People are still playing Russian Campaign now. Or there wouldn't be, demand for new groups. So, or new, publications of Russian Campaign. So people want that game, right? Or they want an equivalent of that game. And even Avalon Hill was trying to, make lightning strike twice on that with things like Russian Front. So, which I think did not quite succeed, although there's some people that like Russian Front on its own terms as well. Jeff mentioned good wargaming stores I have known. The problem is I haven't known any. We've got a couple of okay game stores in the area, and I'm aware that there are good Wargame stores elsewhere, like at the Complete Strategist in New York City, or the Gamers Armory down in North Carolina, or that other place over in Chicago, and I think Minnesota might have one too. But the I don't know that it's still a good topic idea, and I might do it, but I'm not personally not going to be able to add much to that conversation. Robert Moffat mentions the Jedko homage Russian campaign coming from Compass. That should be pretty soon, I believe. There's also the 5th edition, whatever it is, from GMT, which has kind of been in pipeline hell for a long time now. I have offered my opinion as to what the delay caused the delay was, and I was told I was wrong, so I'm not going to say it again because I might have been wrong. So, nevertheless, there's a new version from GMT that will be coming at some point. GMT stands for the initials of the founders of GMT, at least one of whom left more or less immediately to go found the legendarily terrible company Fresno Games Association. And G is Gene Billingsley. They're the first names. So even back in the day, like back in the 90s, so when we say Matrix Games, everybody in the chat's probably going to think, unless you're from the west side of Cleveland, is going to think of Matrix Games, the computer game company. But prior to Matrix Games, the computer game company, there was a store in Sheffield Lake, Ohio called Matrix Games and Diversions. And it was a really, really good store for role-playing games. And it was not a bad store for wargaming either, but there was never like a wargaming community happening there. But I definitely picked up some Avalon Hill stuff back in the day. Tactics. Are you talking about the publisher, Doug? The publisher of Tactics? Because that was the name of a publisher who had some really striking box covers, no less. I don't know if the T stands for Tony or not. I mean, I know Tony's there. But I don't know if the T is for Tony or if it was from some other T who left. I know the main people at GMT now are Gene and Tony and Mark Simonich, and I think Roger is still in the loop on that. So, okay. So I think they published some stuff too then, unless there were two companies with that name, which is not impossible. Hey, let's hope, right? L2 did some stuff that's really well regarded. Mostly stuff that other people had done. They did a Bitter Woods that is very well regarded. They did a Streets of Stalingrad. They did a couple other things. They did a Russian campaign too, thinking about it. And those are all well regarded versions of those games. Now I gotta look this up and I gotta figure out who I'm talking about. And I can't think. This is the game. These are the guys I'm talking about. Yeah, the M guy left is the guy that left to form. It wasn't Roger. Is the guy that left to form Fresno. These guys, a Tactics Adventure Games. That's who I figured you were talking about. Now I've never owned any of these. I physically might have seen a couple of them from time to time, but they had really good covers. This is a really good cover. This is like a 1982 game, and if you look at these guys, they had a couple of things, all of which had really strong covers. This is a really good cover. The game looks primitive, but the covers are awesome. Maybe it's, I don't know, but I shouldn't say anything bad about the games. This Fight for the Sky, great cover. Look at that. That's a cool cover. We could talk about best cover art actually, but next time I talk about a graphics thing, I'm gonna come prepared with a slideshow. This Interstellar Wars, again, the game looks a little primitive, but boy, that's a cool cover. This is the one that I remember seeing on the shelf at back in the day. Oh, and look at these counters too. Wow, those are not awesome counters. But whoever these guys were, and there's no information on them on BGG. Maybe they're the same folks, and maybe they're not. I have no idea. None of these have. This one's Ray D. Smith. Doug, that makes it sound like it's a different bunch. I mean, especially if you look at the dates on these things, these are all like early 80s. So these are really attractive boxes for the early 80s. And they are all like legit boxes too, not the Mickey Mouse. In fairness, I'm going to say Roger's got, by far the most. Well, Roger's got tons of iconic Wargame covers, but there's also plenty of good Wargame covers that somebody besides Roger did too. I mean, the obvious example would be Redmond Simonson, right? Which are those Simonson's stuff is like masterpiece of graphic design, even where he had very primitive tools and very primitive color palette to work with. He did a lot with very little. But I mean, Roger is the Redmond Simonson is no longer with us. And Roger is definitely the greatest living Wargame box artist. I don't think it's close. Let me put it that way. All right, so it is 10:05 p.m. So here's what's happening. Next Monday we will be back here. Charlie hasn't done that many boxes though. That's what I'm talking about specifically in this context. Charlie is a map guy and has done plenty of counters too. I don't know that Charlie has done very many boxes. Roger has also done his share of maps and counters, by the way, just so you know. I think the Starfleet Battles counters, even the older ones, are better than less ugly than those. All right, so next Monday we will be back here with a topic to be determined at 8 p.m. Eastern, whatever time slot that it is, 8 p.m. Eastern. On Wednesday, we will be streaming with Dan at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. And like I said, I think that's over at Dan's channel this week. Tomorrow, probably you're not going to see anything. Thursday, you'll see an unboxing video, and on Friday, you'll see another unboxing video of the ancient GDW Great Patriotic War, which turned out to be an even more interesting unboxing than I expected it to be. So check that out. And it's also a thing that you don't see removed from the shrink wrap nowadays very often, particularly in that condition. Again, I would love to thank everybody for stopping by. Let's take a quick look at our number, which looks like we did not beat 115. But I'm, very happy that 115 people chose to spend their valuable Monday night tuning into this nonsense. So once again, thanks to everybody who turned out. I will see hopefully a couple of you at the OCS Fest, which is occurring this coming weekend. That is this coming weekend. I can't make the whole thing because of work, but I will be there. Hopefully we'll be able to say hello if anybody from the stream has stopped by, and I think there will be at least a couple of people who regularly stop in. So once again, I'd like to say, thanks for watching. I appreciate your support. Just being here is a thing that helps support the channel. Please do thumbs up the video and subscribe if you are not already subscribed. If you'd like to help out with the money side of things, you can look at the Patreon, the merch store, and the Ko-Fi in the video description. All that would be greatly appreciated. So once again, everybody have a great night. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.